Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute high-stakes reality of critical minerals. These are literally the fundamental building blocks of the 21st century. It's the dirt and rock quietly powering the smartphone right there in your hand, your electric vehicle, our entire power grid. But the system actually bringing these materials to us, well, it's currently walking a very, very dangerous tightrope. Let's dive in. To kick things off, let's look at a number that genuinely blew my mind. $6.5 trillion. That's the staggering annual value of global downstream production that is right now at risk because of supply chain choke points. Just to put that into perspective, we're talking about the absolute lifeblood of our automotive, high-tech, defense, and energy sectors all hanging in the balance. Now, to understand exactly why that massive amount of capital is at risk, we really have to look at the immense physical supply chains pulling these new global fuels straight from the earth. Getting these materials out of the ground, that's just step one. Refining that raw earth into ultra-pure, usable components requires monumental, highly specialized infrastructure. The scale of these facilities is just massive. Section 1. The critical minerals boom, fueling the 21st century. So, what's actually driving this massive boom? Well, the energy sector alone is responsible for a staggering 75% of the demand growth for key minerals like copper, lithium, and rare earths. And look, this isn't just a gradual bump, right? It's a total structural rewiring of the global economy. As we push for more EVs and radically upgraded power grids, our appetite for these specific materials is just completely skyrocketing. And driven by that immense appetite, global exploration has surged. We've actually seen a 120% increase in reported energy mineral reserves just since 2010. And honestly, this is fantastic news. It means the resources are absolutely out there. We're finding more lithium, more copper, more nickel. So the good news is we aren't running out of the raw ingredients anytime soon. Section 2. A highly concentrated market. The choke point. But here's the catch. While the raw resources are plentiful, the processing, that presents a glaring vulnerability. If we exclude rare earths for a second, a staggering 72% of global refined supply is concentrated in just the single top-producing country for each mineral. Think of it kind of like a massive global highway, but almost all the traffic is forced through a single toll booth. So even if the mining happens all over the world, nearly 3/4 of it still has to be shipped to one dominant hub just to become usable. And it turns out this trend is only accelerating. Between 2023 and 2025, over 3/4 of the total growth in refined supply came entirely from those dominant suppliers. Take Indonesia, for instance. They accounted for virtually all the growth in refined nickel. Meanwhile, China completely dominated other key minerals. So instead of diversifying like you might expect, we're actually concentrating our refining capacity even further. Section 3. The 2025 export shocks. Vulnerability becomes reality. So what exactly happens when that single toll booth decides to, just close its gates? Well, in 2025, we found out. We saw this rapid cascade of export controls as major players suddenly moved to protect their strategic interests. In April, China restricted heavy rare earths. Then by September, the DRC introduced cobalt export quotas. And by October, China announced even broader controls. In just a matter of months, all those theoretical risks turned into massive, real-world supply shocks. And the direct result of all that? A truly shocking price divergence. Suddenly, materials like gallium cost European buyers up to 5 times more than domestic Chinese buyers. 5 times. Germanium prices nearly tripled. Because when a dominant supplier restricts exports, the global price basically just splinters. It instantly puts outside manufacturers at a massive, massive economic disadvantage. It just goes to show how a tiny kink in the upstream chain completely fractures downstream value. You can clearly see how violently European prices detached from Chinese domestic prices. That expanding gap? That right there is the real-time cost of extreme supply chain fragility. Section 4. The cost of security. Pennies on the dollar. So how on earth do we actually build resilience when diversifying the supply chain inherently costs more? Well, here's a truly surprising insight. While these raw materials are obviously essential, they make up a tiny, tiny fraction of the final product's price. Critical minerals are only about 3% of an EV's price, and rare earth magnets are less than 1%. That means even if the price of rare earths completely tripled, it would only add about 0.1% to the total cost of the car. consumers could easily absorb that small security premium without seeing any massive spikes in end product prices. Yet, despite that flexibility at the consumer level, the midstream processors, the independent smelters, they are literally fighting for their lives right now. Because dominant countries built up this massive excess capacity, the treatment fees that independent custom smelters charge to refine materials completely crashed. They fell to zero or even negative territory going into 2026. And look, without these independent facilities, we lose our diversified processing infrastructure entirely. Section 5. Securing the Future. Pathways to Resilience. Okay, so just like we rely on strategic oil reserves to buffer against shocks, the IEA is highly recommending we create strategic mineral stockpiles. For 11 high-risk materials, this would actually cost less than $900 million annually for countries outside the dominant supplier. And hey, remember that $6.5 trillion of downstream production at risk that we talked about earlier? $900 million is a remarkably cheap insurance policy to protect all of that. But stockpiles are really just step one. The IEA also recommends deploying some smart financial policy tools. Because, let's face it, market forces alone just aren't going to overcome the incredibly high costs of building brand new independent refineries. So we really need smart public finance, things like targeted grants and low-interest loans, stepping in to bridge the gap and de-risk those massive upfront investments. Then there is an often overlooked domestic supply chain, recycling. If we systematically scale up our collection and material recovery tech, recycling could easily double its contribution, hitting nearly 20% of global supply by 2040. I mean, we've got millions of early-generation EVs and wind turbines rapidly approaching the end of their lives. And that isn't just waste, that's a literal goldmine of pre-refined material just waiting to be tapped. And finally, we really have to rethink emerging regions. Right now, places like Latin America produce 40% of global copper and a quarter of our lithium, but they mostly just export the raw dirt. By actually helping them build local refining capacity, they could boost their economic value to $220 billion by 2035. It diversifies the global supply chain, and it brings massive economic benefits to the region. It's just a total win-win. As we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a pretty provocative reality. The resources required for our high-tech, low-emission future, they're already in the ground today. We know exactly where they are, but the new global economy hinges on one vital question: who will actually bring them to the surface? And maybe more importantly, who controls the process of turning them into the future? It's a trillion-dollar puzzle, and definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the critical minerals outlook.